Welcome to Thinking Bodies, a feminist philosophy podcast.
Western philosophers have separated the mind and body, and here on Thinking Bodies, we are pulling on the threads that have always held them together. We crowdsource voice clips to discuss works in feminist philosophy that deserve more attention. Our podcast collages with these clips as a feminist DIY experiment.
Maybe even a DIT experiment, like doing it together.
Right. This is a Do It Together podcast, where we share the sounds of feminist philosophy. Okay, I'm here with Dr. Catherine Clune-Taylor, a friend of the pod.
Yes, friend of the pod.
I am Simon Ruchti. I am an associate professor in the Department of Philosophy at Westchester University in Pennsylvania.
We want to start off by giving a huge thank you to Corinne Lajoie.
Yes, we do.
Corinne was the guest producer on our last episode. I learned a lot. I had a lot of fun.
I did too.
Yeah.
So much fun.
And we've been putting it out there since our first episode to get guest producers. And I hope this is the start of more collaborations. If you want to get involved or you have an idea, get in touch with us. Listen to the episode with Corinne. It's phenomenal. And
it really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're doing something a little different today, Kristin, because we went on a little podcast road trip.
We did.
We did. We crossed the Canada-US border somewhat trepidatiously, very trepidatiously, back in March with our microphones and our recorders.
I know. And we had this conversation about whether our recording devices and all of our batteries were going to get us stuck at security, and mine did.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Mine did not.
No. They didn't like how many batteries I had in my bag. I
just
brought
so many batteries.
I brought batteries for more episodes than we could have ever recorded. Anyway.
You were backing up the backup. You had backup plans for days. That's all.
They're all of my anxiety batteries. Anyways.
That's right.
We talked to some amazing philosophers, some thinking bodies. Yes. And this episode is the first of what we wanted to share, what we recorded. Who's the best Golden Girl?
B. Arthur.
Dorothy.
Yeah.
Why?
Because she's just so dry with her sense of humor.
Who is the best Golden Girl?
Oh my God, that is a controversial question, and yet I'm going to be brave and say what we all know, and that it's Dorothy.
You know what? It's Sophia all day long.
Wow. Okay.
And you know what? Here's why.
Okay.
Both of them were quite adamant about Dorothy. And maybe this speaks to my philosophical orientation, but you just don't get Dorothy without Sophia.
You're not wrong. Yeah. You're not wrong about that.
The inappropriate wisecracks, they play off of Dorothy, right? I loved her twisting stories that were totally made up, and at the end, the punchline would be that it was her all along in the story, She was always up to something with the other seniors, and I just love that. And she was the original, bad words incoming, the original sort of give no fucks old lady on TV. And I loved it. And she would roast Stanley, the ex-husband.
For me, it is obviously Rose. That is the obvious answer. First of all, I maintain that she is the smartest. I maintain this.
Okay.
So I appreciate that about her. But I think she's also an excellent litmus test for people. So depending on how we respond to Rose, okay, I think is a really important litmus test.
Okay, couple things. First of all... You saying that she's the smartest is what we philosophers call taking the non-dominant view. Okay, that's That's I'm interested in how you defend that, or if you plan to at all. And then and then I'd like to hear more about why she's a good litmus test for other people.
She's a good litmus test because I think she is a couple of things. I think she is the most like sort of openly provincial character. They're all provincial in their own ways, but she's sort of openly provincial in ways that I think we all are, regardless of how sophisticated we are. But hers is just sort of right out on the surface. So there's that. But the reason why she's a good litmus test, I think, is because she has qualities that some people find annoying, but some people also find sort of annoyingly maybe femmy in ways that they don't appreciate. And I also think that you have to pay attention to her. I think she's a very divergent thinker. So I always think that if people can tolerate Rose, they are a safe person. That's how I sort of view that litmus test.
I love that. This is not what I thought we would talk about, and yet I love it.
She might still be annoying. Yeah. I understand that. Yes. Yeah. Right, so today we're starting a series of episodes on the theme of trans philosophy with lots of the smart and funny, engaging clips of conversations that we had at the Thinking Trans Thinking Conference.
Yeah, and we're kind of introducing a few things. We're thinking about philosophy conferences, what they're like, how they are places where we get to do philosophy. Right? They're one of the things that I think are highlights, right? We meet people, we learn. And then also specifically about trans philosophy, which is the subject of the conference we went to. And so I feel like maybe some of our listeners don't know much about philosophy conferences. So I was thinking maybe we could set the scene and kind of describe what they're like.
Yeah, so that's a great idea. So usually when a conference is announced, you submit a paper to the organizers. Sometimes the paper gets accepted. And then when it's accepted, you head off to the conference so that you and a bunch of other people who have also submitted papers that have been accepted can present your papers to one another. And so I usually think of conferences as one of the ways we can try out our work in philosophy. So scientists have labs, and we have conferences, something like that.
Yeah. And sometimes, you know some of the people at the conference, but sometimes you don't. You know, you're going to a new society. Maybe you're going to one you've gone to a number of times. And so sometimes it's more about that. Sometimes it's more about the hang than it is about the topic, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're trying to find friends in a city where you know people. But anyway, the actual work of it is a lot of sitting.
Yes, so much sitting.
You're sitting, you're facing the front of a room. A person usually presents paper for about 20 or 30 minutes, and then there's 10 minutes of questions. Sometimes there's a dedicated respondent who's looked at the paper for a while ahead of time. And then you just kind of repeat that over and over again. And if you're lucky, in between those papers, there's time to stand up, go for a drink, go to the washroom, whatever, have something to eat. They can be pretty jam-packed
And like weirdly physically grueling with all of that sitting. Some of us are smart enough now to kind of get up and stand at the back of the room. At this conference, the organizer was very, very attentive to the fact that we have bodies and that they affect our ability to think. So there was excellent food, there were plenty of breaks, and we were in this really beautiful library. So the space felt really convivial. There were places to sit and relax and to chat. So it was a really great conference.
Mm-hmm. And it's worth mentioning because conferences don't always have that feature.
No,
sometimes you are in a bunker. In the basement somewhere.
Yes, you are.
And there's no snacks, and it's a bit grim. I wish philosophy conferences had more of this and less of this.
More casual conversations and less of the fighting over semantics.
Love that.
So I wish philosophy conferences had, I'm going to say two things. I'm going to say three things. I wish they had more interdisciplinarity and was like less hostile to, less hostile to multidisciplinarity, particularly given how rigid philosophy is about like its methods. I wish philosophy conferences had better food. And I wish they had more time for socializing and fun.
Yeah. If someone asked me, I wish they had more, I would say karaoke, dancing.
Yeah. We're all very serious.
Yes.
And we need to not be as serious.
It seems like there's this perception that there's a lot of fighting at philosophy conferences. Oh, geez.
I mean, there can be. That's possible, I suppose.
Yeah. Fighting over semantics and rigid in its methods and combine that with people being hungry.
Yeah. Yes. And drinking quite a lot of coffee. So, yes, altogether, it can be a little charged. That's true. Yeah.
Anna, what do you wish philosophy conferences had more or less of?
Oh, well, I wish they had less posturing because it is fucking exhausting dealing with the posturing. And as a coping mechanism, I get it, right? Like, these are sort of awkward social situations sometimes. You're meeting a lot of people you don't know. You're trying to, appear to be qualified and credible and all of these things. But being on the receiving end of posturing is hell. And I cannot state this strongly enough. For some people to posture, other people have to be an audience. And I tend to be an audience, and it is exhausting. So, like, I always wish, like, could we maybe just be more frank? Like, this is weird and awkward. It's also geeky fun, but it can be weird and awkward. Like, I feel weird. Do you feel weird? Maybe that's just me. But maybe a way to say that is to say, like, more like expectations of collective hospitality with one another. And also to echo the point about food, I really think that just some like real bread that maybe you cut with knives and like jam and tea just all the time would probably help, with everyone's stress level, but it also gives you something to talk about and, there's a niceness to that. What about you, Kristin?
Well, I echo your idea of carbs.
Yes.
Bring
on the carbs.
I'm thinking of all those studies they do about parole hearings where people are much more forgiving when they've just had lunch. And I wonder if we maybe pay attention enough to our body states and how that affects thinking. And well, for me, for conferences, I will say, like I said to Catherine there, the karaoke and dancing, of course. Yeah. I think there's something to kind of letting guards down. So maybe that's a connection to your question of posturing. Yeah. And also food. I feel like conferences put me on a diet.
They do. Yes.
Force me to pack a food bag. If I'm going to be really nerdy and just answer
be nerdy.
Answer like I really want to answer. I wish these conferences had more emphasis on professional development and skills. So, like, how do we do parts of the job that enable kind of the things that we also want to do? So, how do we apply for jobs? How do we deal with writing and publishing? Maybe we need to have sessions on being an ethical mentor or supervisor, even things like giving a good presentation.
Yeah.
I think that there's something about, we kind of have a standard presentation in philosophy, which is reading a paper, but we also have to your point about audience, it's like, well, that's me writing for a journal. Am I writing for a listener in the room?
Yeah, and it's different.
Yeah, am I here to share my ideas? Yeah. And then, I have a whole list of things that I wish we had skills workshops on here, doing public philosophy, teaching workshops, and then being a good colleague. So doing admin and service work, maybe where the connection is between being a philosopher and certain kinds of work, parts of the job, which are so important.
So important. And often very demanding, especially in neoliberal institutions like that.
Yeah.
That's real. So yeah, I think that's right. Like thinking about how to do that and be a good colleague would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can hear kind of a criticism of me saying, well, that would be expanding the scope, you know? And I guess I kind of am biting that bullet.
Yeah.
And saying that would just be a good thing, right?
It would be a good thing. Yeah, absolutely.
If you could teach philosophy to high schoolers, what would you pick and why?
If I could get away with teaching what I wanted to teach, I would teach a philosophy of sexuality. Because they have no understanding of what sex is. They don't understand why they're so excited about it, why they're afraid of it, why they maybe should be at times afraid of it, and why they need to get over that fear of it.
And what would a philosophical approach to that give them?
I think it would entertain them, that's for sure. I think it would give them a sense of why they have their anxieties. And I think that's the biggest part for young people, is they're so anxious about sex, helping them understand why.
I actually think the philosophy I would teach to high school students, if I could, I think would be, Foucault's work on power and on identity and subject formation. I think that teenagers are like so wrapped up in this process of figuring out their identity and who they are, and it might be helpful to like historically situate that, but also think about how it's actually not just about who you are, but all of these kind of categories and understandings of the self that are available to us are also part of these larger systems of power, right?
And same question to you, Anna.
Oh.
What would you teach to high school students should you get the chance?
Should I get the chance? I think that would probably be a bad idea. I feel like I would lead some sort of corrupting revolution, which would be fine in my book, but I'm not sure that they would like it. I think this question sort of gets at like what we want to see more of in the world.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I'd want at least Canadian students to learn is something about Aristotle's idea of moral luck. I would give that a sort of critical reading, combined with the idea from Schopenhauer that we might best greet one another as my fellow sufferer or my equal in misery. Like, we can maybe disagree about what constitutes the good human life, but I'd like them to come to university without the idea that you quote unquote make your own luck, because honestly, fuck that. I would like a world in which fewer people had that idea.
So why moral luck specific? Okay, well, first of all, let's have a little tiny primer on moral luck. But why moral luck for high schoolers?
Well, so the bit about moral luck in Aristotle, this is the idea that, broadly speaking, how good your life is depends on luck, because how good your life is depends on things like your health and your capacities and who your adults were, who you get to mimic as you work to become an adult, whether your children grow up beyond you to make you look terrible. All these things are things that are sort of out of our control a lot of the time. So there's this question of luck. And that gets us to the part where what we call luck and how good your life is, concretely speaking, is actually just the products. These are all the things that are products of the systems that human beings have created for ourselves, and that collectively we could change. Right? Those situations are never natural. They're created by us. The fact that some of us are like born into situations where there's active warfare against people like us, while others get to flourish, right, from the beginning, is luck, and that, like, we don't decide, right? That's true. But whether those situations exist are matters of work and decision. And so you can have a critical reading of that, right? You can also sort of ask questions that Aristotle did not ask about, like, how natural, right, this luck is. And whether these are products of, right, cultural construction, as we might say. And there's also quite a lot of joy, I think, when I approach you on some level with, like, hey, like, being a human being is kind of hard, right? Like, I see you trying so hard and it being really terrible a lot of the time. And I'm with you in this moment. And I think that stuff would set them up potentially for the more meaty stuff that I'd want to teach them at university, or if not at university, because of course there are lots of other good lines of life. It might set them up for, like, citizenship with basic decency. Something like that. Or maybe all of this just boils down to the fact that I'd like them to learn statistics about how vulnerable we are all the time in the world to one another. Maybe that's all I want. Well, what about you, Kristin?
Well, I kind of want to say something about this question of being a human being is kind of hard. And it made me think about driving. How much nicer we are to people face to face, but then when we're driving someone, like, puts their signal light on, like, a little bit late, and we're like, you piece
what
of
is wrong with you?
Yeah. And so it's just kind of like, no, there's a person in that car. Do you always signal on time? Like,
that's right.
Can we not see each other? Like, how do you decide, right? One piece is, like, what would I wish Kristin had in high school?
You
know, or what would she have needed at that time? And I think I would teach Sarah Ahmed on happiness, which is a good connection to what you said about luck, right? Because she talks about hap as
that's right,
chance, and sort of
happenstance.
Yes, and so this idea that it's quite modern to feel like you are in charge of your own hap, your own chance. And that idea came from somewhere, and that idea is doing some work. And so Ahmed talks about happiness as a kind of promise, a promise. So we get turned towards happiness because we think that if we get near the things that we're told will make us happy, that will make us happy. And so this idea is, if we can give it a historical context, they would start to see that the choices that you make are actually conditioned by and pointed towards not necessarily some kind of sense of satisfaction or fulfillment or purpose, but really about keeping all of us geared into a sort of neoliberal, white supremacist capitalist system, right? It's about conditioning our choices towards this promise. I think why do I want students to have happiness on their radar? Because I think a lot of the ways that we come into a political understanding as high schoolers is to think about injustice in terms of unequal access to happiness. Right? And I think it's just, and so what we need is happiness for all, right? The pursuit of happiness for all, right? But I think that's a very narrow political question. And so Ahmed made me completely question this and redirected my thinking towards different indicators of oppression. So instead of thinking, what's going to make me happy, I started to think, how does happiness work? How does happiness work? So I'd like high schoolers to be thinking about how they get turned this way or that towards these different promises of happiness. And maybe they can start to think of values or purposes in life other than happiness. Like, community or justice or politics or participating in labor movements or protecting the environment, you know?
Yeah.
Starting to think about happiness as what it often is, which is a political tool. I was going to say that I was going to admit that I watch bad reality TV. And
okay, you can admit that. This is a safe space.
Some of the goals, it seems, for people coming together, and of course this is probably a feature of people who want to be on reality TV, but it is probably reflective of culture, is to be a power couple.
Oh, yes.
Right? We're going to be a power couple.
Okay.
And that's a point, that's a way of creating a hierarchy. Yes. Of what a good relationship is. And I think it works a little bit like happiness, where it's like we're going to have this perfect together thing where we are achieving a certain way, we're looking a certain way, the accumulation of capital, blah, blah, blah. Like, what do you think of when you think of someone saying, oh man, they're such a power couple?
I think...
That's very fair. That's very fair.
I think I will tiptoe in a wide berth around that power couple. Yeah, no, but I think you're right. I think that's exactly right. That there's something about the ways that, there's something even structurally about the ways that we understand happiness as something to aim for, and also the sort of like the materializing of that in the power couple, right? There's something sort of connected between those. Yeah, that's really interesting. So I think like you and I should probably tag team this high school education.
We should. Because
I think Aristotle's bit on moral luck kind of comes up with that discussion of happiness, in which his line is really like, no, happiness is not feeling warm fuzzies or following your bliss, ding dongs. Like, happiness is a matter of living up to human capacities, and it's hard, and most of us are bad at it, and there are a lot of things in the world that we can't control. Having said that, that also opens the space for saying that, Aristotle misidentified a bunch of the things over which we have no control, because of course there are things that we can change, including right, how we orient toward happiness. And so, I mean, I think I could come in with the problem, and you could give them like a really nice reading from Ahmed on how to approach happiness as an alternative.
Yeah, and other than Ahmed, I would probably teach some foundational liberal theory and critiques of that, just so they can better understand kind of their, like, the current political rhetoric, understand their world and what's wrong with it, what could be improved, or maybe something on the philosophy of technology, something to understand, their phones and the sort of content economy. But I could probably go on forever.
I think both I think the four of us actually could probably make some good trouble with the high school students. Yes.
And hopefully they wouldn't turn on us too badly. Okay. So I asked Simon sort of about pressing questions that keep coming back to him in his research.
Oh, how is it that we got to where we are today? And what are ways to sort of get out of that? So much of what's making a mess of my country right now is our obsession with a certain kind of masculinity. And I argue that masculinity is a myth, doesn't actually exist. It's just in our minds and hurts us. I think in America, in the United States, it was because we were panicked when we lost that western frontier. And so we had to come up with something to replace it. And so we created this myth of the ever-present, ever-virile, ever-conquering man. And that's what we're still trying to deal with, even though we've run out of things to conquer. So we make up new things, like trans people are the new thing to conquer.
That's really cool. It's like the mass psychology of Western expansion and frontiersmanship. And now we've found a gender minority, a different body. Are you familiar with Liddell McWhorter's work?
Mm-mm.
Okay. She has this great book, Racism and Sexual Oppression in Anglo-America, which kind of gives a genealogy of the connection between racial and sexual oppression around the idea of course, like white imperialist sort of like colonial America's goals for sort of expansion and exceptionalism, but also that plays out through the idea of containing and controlling the abnormal. And that's abnormal sexuality, abnormal bodies. So whether that's disabled bodies in the project of eugenics, or if that's like who's reproducing and why, and how their trajectory into a grown-up heterosexual who makes good babies is part of the national project. So I was just thinking about that in terms of how the fear of trans kids has become kind of emblematic of that loss of that Western exceptionalism.
Right. Yeah, the flawed bodies that prove the flaws in all of our bodies.
It's part of the discussion of trans philosophy going on at this conference, is this idea of like sort of a lost narrative around about sort of gender normativity, right? And how trans kids are being harmed by medicine or whatever, Jordan Peterson crying his tears or whatever. And one of the things McWhorter talks about in that book is that part of successful gender normativity in a person is that gender normativity in their child, but not just that child grows up according to the heterosexual matrix, but that they're also reproductive. Right. So my parenting success is my grandparenting success, because I'm reproducing the nation through the child.
And it's funny, I can on some levels understand the anxiety of the parent with a kid who comes out to them as trans, because you've spent so much of, even before they were born, imagining what their life would be like. And now that person that you imagine and the future you imagine disappears. But that's something that every parent has to face at some point or another. It's just somehow become more traumatic for us when our kid comes out as trans.
Yeah, and so that trauma so often appears to parents as like a product of the child who is trans, and not a product of the pervasive myths about masculinity and what is natural that are already harming us, already very traumatic. And that's why Simon's work on masculinity here is so important. Because even these ways of relating to our children and thinking about, thinking that we can know what they will be and what their lives will be like and what our lives with them will be like, is understandable. But it's also a kind of violence, and maybe a gendering violence, often a gendering violence. I'm just thinking one of my first published articles is about this idea that we can know our children before they're born. But that's really inseparable from a kind of frontiersmanship, right? And a sense of like claiming other people's lives and bodies. I also just wanted to highlight Simon's comment that, right, there are flawed bodies that prove the flaws in all of our bodies, which hit my, that was a gut punch moment.
So you primarily teach in women's and gender studies. If tomorrow you had to swap disciplines, where are you going and why?
I would go to the history department.
Really?
Because I love old shit. Well, it's like, I like to figure out how we convinced ourselves of the histories that we believe in. And sometimes there's just really funny stories from the past.
I'm going to a desert island and I can only bring 2 philosophers' work with me. Who are they?
Ooh, okay. I think I'm bringing, one of them is Foucault. That's really easy. Who is the second? So actually, I would say the second is Sylvia Wynter, because I have not read enough Sylvia Wynter. So I would want to like spend some time. Sylvia Wynter is one of those people who, you know, being a philosopher, we didn't really read. And I read so many people who draw on her so generatively. And I really need to, I keep telling myself, like, I'm going to take a month and have a little summer school for myself.
Sylvia Wynter.
Yeah, exactly. And just never keep getting there. So that's what I do.
If you're going to a desert island and you can only bring 2 philosophers' work, whose would you bring and why?
Plato, because I love Plato, and Butler, because Butler, I think, informs so much of what I do.
I did some soul searching about this question, okay? It's not easy. You're on a desert island. You're going to need a lot of material.
Yep.
And so I said Beauvoir because Simone de Beauvoir has, you know, novels and plays and memoirs and journals, and as well as like dense philosophical works. So I feel like that would definitely keep me mentally engaged.
Yeah.
And then I have to agree with Simon. I'm gonna bring Judith Butler.
Yeah. I mean, again, lots of like chewy, sweaty stuff to like dig into there. Yeah.
But given your love of hypotheticals, Anna, what would you
Yes.
what would you bring?
Yes. Bring me my soapbox, please. I have some things to say about thought experiments, but we may just leave that for another episode.
Yeah, let's do that.
I would bring Maria Lugones because she's amazing. I would bring Donna Haraway because funny and dogs. And I think I would bring Antonio Gramsci because I almost certainly should have read more of Gramsci more seriously than I ever have. So I maybe need an Antonio Gramsci winter.
Okay, and I'm just going to avoid the rules here and say you're taking 3.
I am taking 3. Oh, yes.
That's fine. That's why it's not a real question. Okay, so if you took the brain of an, let's say, an 18-year-old person, you put them through a 4-year degree in philosophy, and then you looked at that brain again, what would be different about it?
Oh, so I think that's a brain that would be a lot more critical and would think about the kinds of like assumptions that underwrite a lot of arguments or what people say. I think it's also a brain that would recognize that like we often use the same words to refer to different things, right? And that we need to kind of be clear about what we mean and when we're on the same page. Like there's a lot of things I find kind of annoying about the way that philosophers write, but one of the things we're really great at is like clarity and specificity, in terms of like, when I say this is what I mean, so we can all kind of be on the same page. But I think philosophical brain is also one that like recognizes everything kind of needs to be understood in its historical moment, right? That certain understandings of the self can only emerge when certain other things happen. for example. But I think the philosophical brain is one that is very good at argumentation, and starts to recognize that like actually a lot of arguments that we see in the world are bad.
Yeah, I like that. One thing I was thinking of is when you're describing that you're also kind of forming a view of philosophy that looks at conditions of possibility.
Yes.
And so that's a bit of your orientation.
Yes.
In a way, right?
Yeah.
Because, other orientations would say something about objective truth or something like that.
Yeah. No, that's definitely, my orientation as someone who, my kind of areas of specialization were feminist philosophy, philosophy of sex, gender, and sexuality, but also philosophy of science, and especially kind of feminist approaches to philosophy of science, feminist epistemology. And so, I'm not someone who talks about ideals in truth. I'm always kind of thinking about how knowledge is a system and the rules of it can change. So what counts as what we know at one point can be different at another place in time.
One of the ways that this question has been answered that I think would square with you and with the person who would answer it differently is this idea of philosophy training us about knowing what we don't know.
Yeah.
So like the studying the history of science and in philosophy of science doesn't make you more grounded in the idea that science gives us objective facts.
No. I often say that I think like science, what we call science today, which is admittedly like very hard to define. It looks really different in different disciplines, but I still grant that it is like the most efficient system for producing reliable knowledge that we've produced. But, I also grant that like that system might be refined in the future, right? It might change. We might change our minds about what we think we know. And I do think actually, what you just pointed out there, where you hit on saying that like the philosophical mind is one that kind of has a sense of what it doesn't know. I think we need a lot more of that today. Like, I think that's quite right. And there is a kind of, now admittedly, not all philosophers espouse epistemic humility, and I think more should, but I think that's a particularly important virtue.
So I think of you as someone who is really engaged in a kind of public philosophy where you're looking at what people are saying and analyzing arguments. So what is the most satisfying fallacy that you have found in the wild?
Oh, so I mean, I'm going to say that I feel like in my field I look a lot at like the science of sex and gender. And I would say the biggest fallacy to my mind is the naturalistic fallacy. So the idea that something that is whatever we see in the world, right, like a descriptive claim about what is, means that it should be, or that we can derive a normative claim from that. And I think in my field, that is underwriting all of our debates about like, is being trans natural, or is it socially, is it a result of an ideological movement, or is it a natural thing, or is it natural to be binarily sexed, right? And anytime people are circulating in those arguments, they're trying to say that like it is natural, so it's good, or it is natural, so it should be. We should allow it. We should recognize people with these kinds of embodiments or these identities. And my thing is like, actually, issues like ethics and morality really actually have nothing to do with the claims about what is natural, right? Like, it's not natural that I wear glasses either, right? It's not natural that we have complex social systems and use money and travel around in cars, right? And so, but that argument still carries a lot of weight, even among people who I think should know better.
Actually, that's what I was going to ask you a follow-up on that about, which is that I feel like the naturalistic fallacy works on all sides of the political spectrum.
Yeah.
Because natural is one of these sort of unquestioned goods, like health, you know?
Yeah.
That's not healthy,
Right.
which is an argument against it, right? And so it's like, well, what do you mean by health?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with natural. Like, it's kind of like you want to claim that something has always existed. That's going to have a problem when you're up against a kind of ideological power system that is about dominating and annihilating. It's like, well, it's not a claim to protection.
No, it's a claim that's being made to weaponize, right? I often think we're weaponizing the natural when we're constituting certain groups as unnatural, right? That they shouldn't exist, that they shouldn't be, or be as they are at the very least. And so we're deriving a lot of like ethical and political claims from that, in a way that is not justifiable, though it is kind of how our system has been constituted, right? Like if we think about our political systems, and often, you know, arguments about kind of discriminate or against discrimination are often about like proving that people couldn't have been otherwise, right? However, again, it's completely fallacious, right? Like, and it feels to me like a kind of distracting shell game that we're playing, where I'm like, maybe people just need rights.
I know.
Right?
Yeah. What if people just have rights?
Yeah, what if people just had rights? That's a thought. Catherine's actually making me think about a lot of things, but one of the things she's making me think about is one of the things I always hope for my students, which is something like a comfort with discomfort, and especially with uncertainty and unknowing. Not as like happy with ignorance or sort of blissful in that, but as skilled enough to be confident in their capacities to doubt and to question, and themselves most of all, in an effort to know better and to understand, right? Even if we never quite get there. And this is a really good example, right? What if what makes most of us comfortable end up being instances of the naturalistic fallacy? Like, well, what if most of our comfort is derived from the naturalistic fallacy? It's an interesting point she's making.
So like my feelings of comfort actually depend on the operation of this idea that the way things are the way they should be. Wow. Yeah, that seems right. I'm just trying to think of an example of that.
Well, I wonder whether thinking about gender might work here. So like gender both as a way of understanding human beings, or a system for understanding human beings, and for understanding ourselves. Like, what happens when we ask ourselves about our own gender, if we haven't been doing that already? Some of us have been doing that probably since we were we. But do any of our available ways of understanding gender and gendering work? Can they work? What does that mean for my gender and how I understand myself? And is there space for something like gender to be both connected to something natural, right? Whatever that is, and whatever we take to be natural about ourselves, but also absolutely cultural and constructed, right? And how clean is that nature-culture line, and how clean can it be? Like, I sort of hope for my students that they might get to a point where they can sort of feel like, I'm confident and critically skilled enough to ask the interesting and important questions and be open to the answers, even if they're only ever sort of like working answers. Right. And I think my first year students, even often have a sense of something like this. Like they seem to know that knowing seems important, but that somehow understanding is better, even if they're not really sure what either of those are. So can I be careful and thoughtful enough to proceed on the basis of working theories, knowing that those might end up being mistaken? And to Catherine's point, what sort of potential opens up if we can take that sort of stance or posture?
Yeah, and to connect it to what we talked about earlier, about sort of techniques of doing philosophy and sort of rigidity and methods, it would be quite a problem for us to say something like the kind of thing that gender is one that doesn't allow for clean conceptual clarity around this nature culture discussion. It's just the kind of thing that it is, in the sense that it's personal, that it's relational, that it's embodied, that it's social, that it's just a very difficult kind of thing to collapse into any kind of binary, all kinds of binary assumptions or understandings, and that we can sit with that difficulty and have a working answer about gender, and that isn't the same thing as saying it's fictional and made up and just construct, like that it's a working answer, a good working answer.
Good working answer, maybe.
That we have for understanding ourselves, but that it's evolving, and that we can. It's part of coming to understand ourselves as. I was just about to say beings in the world, but I don't know why I would be being Heideggerian at this time of day. But
or any time of day, perhaps.
So like I really identify with what you're saying, so like ideally you and Catherine and Simon, ideally some of the value of philosophy is coming from not just the idea that we might be wrong, but actually having this experience of working through ideas that change, and that learning to go through the experience of changing ideas is of value. Maybe we're doing some of that at conferences sometimes. Maybe we're doing some of that talking with each other. Actually, if I could revise part of my response about conferences, is that I wish that it had more organic conversation. And organic conversation that sort of demonstrated methods, because there's always question period, which isn't quite there are moments in question period that can be very generative, but there is something to a kind of philosophical back and forth that doesn't necessarily have a goal. Not an expressed goal, where question period is very much, let's find problems with this person's paper and either offer them solutions or offer them, places to go, whatever. In the literature. And so I was thinking about how even my own philosophy training, if you asked me about going in and coming out after 4 years and what would be different about me, is just profound loss of certainty in so many things that were, to me, clear ideas about who I should become and what I had goals I had and what was true in the world, and I guess for some reason that put me on a path to do it more. I don't know.
I mean, there is something about having a certain amount of experience maybe with thinking in that way, and thinking really rigorously in that way, right? Because I think the other thing is that it's, when we talk about uncertainty in philosophy, we're not talking about this sort of like, I don't know, it's whatever you want it to be, right? Like that is antithetical to the whole discipline.
Yeah. And something I was thinking about was that, you can imagine someone who might have preconceptions about what goes on at a trans philosophy conference. And we've talked a lot on the podcast about forms of power enacted through philosophy. And what I find so interesting is that a lot of what we ended up talking to, Simon and Catherine and others about was the value of philosophy for the area of, thinking about trans philosophy, feminist philosophy, and, also life in general.
Even these really internally critical forms of philosophy come back to the value of philosophy.
Thank you so much to Catherine Clune-Taylor and Simon Ruchti. Thank you to everyone who works at the Skillman Library at Lafayette College for that recording space, and for Amy Marvin for including us in her wonderful conference, and to all the participants at the Thinking Trans and Trans Thinking Conference for their generosity and for trusting us with our microphones.
Our trusty microphones.
That's
and
right.
Trustworthy
That's
wielders of microphones. This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Nahiwak, the Anishinaabeg, the Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota peoples, and on the lands of the Michif Métis Nation, which is also called Pile of Bones.
And on Amisquahiskikan, the homelands of the Plains Cree, the Woodland Cree, the Beaver Cree, the Ojibwe, and the Métis, also called Beaver Hills House.
All the references for what we discussed on the podcast today are on our website. Our theme music is by Seth Makes Sounds and Joseph Press. Thank you so much to the Amplified Podcast Network for all of your mentorship and for getting this podcast created. And on that note, if you'd like to contribute to our DIT experiment, give feedback, or propose ideas for our next episodes, or if you would like to serve as a guest producer, please go to our website, thinkingbodiespod.com.
What's a song you can't not dance to?
Anything my daughter puts on her iPad, because she makes me dance to it.
What's a song that you can't not dance to?
Juvenile's Back That Ass Up.
The inflection there is just perfect. Oh my god.
I know. We need that song at more philosophy conferences.